My fellow Americans, by which, of course, I mean all sentient beings across time and space, we have grave matters to discuss. Also, matters of jubilation, celebration. We have achieved so much already. We have so much to be proud of, and we have so much further to go. But of course, we would have it no other way. We are always seeking to push onward and carry on with what is to be done in every time, in every space that appears different. What is the boulder that we have to apply our shoulder to? What is the place we need to go to? Who are the people we need to speak to? What is it that we need to say? What is it that we need to apply ourselves to? We ask ourselves these questions, we find answers, and we get to it. With that, I would like to turn our attention to the idea of America itself. This is an idea, of course, of the utmost importance. A former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, discussed this idea, the idea of America, in comments made about the soon to be inaugurated President elect Donald John Trump, calling Trump fascist. I'm attempting to find the exact words for you, although I'm afraid this will be hidden behind these sorts of walls. What was reported, however, was that Mark Milley said that here in America, I'm realizing I'm not sharing my screen with you. But so Mark Milley reported that, we do not pledge allegiance to a person, right? We pledge allegiance to the Constitution, right, of the United States. I'm not familiar with the oath, but I have it here. The oath of enlistment reads that I, state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Act of May 1960, replacing the wording first adopted in 1789. That's interesting. So, this idea of the Constitution of the United States, right, comes up there. Crucially, though, Milley went on to say that not only do we pledge allegiance to the Constitution, but that also to the idea of America. I wonder if I can find that for you. Yes, now it might be appropriate to show you what it is that I'm looking for. So we'll do that. Yes, so here, we take an oath to the Constitution, not to a wannabe dictator. Here, we don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die to protect it. So with that in mind, we will discuss the idea that is America. The first thing that I'd like to emphasize to you is America is defined by a sense of the frontier, right? Where is what is the territory that is considered to be core, right, to the United States of America, exists in what it was in an earlier time called the New World. So we have to think about the very basic features of the planet on which we find ourselves and the way in which people have lived in different places over time. We can basically say that the old world is where most of the land is, or you hear of Afro-Eurasia, or a territory which has sometimes been called the World Island, because, of course, we sometimes discuss multiple continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa, but they can all be traversed by land. And so people from these territories were all commingling and developed eventually technologies which were able to carry them to what's the New World, or the Americas, right? So we have, of course, North and South America. That is the name of what are considered continents. Although, again, I think it's a very perhaps difficult to traverse, especially now, border. But there is land which connects the Americas. So the two continents of North and South America can also be considered one continent, namely America. So America can also be a name which just stands in for the entire New World proper, because of course there's also islands. So technically, America would be, the contiguous landmass, and then the islands of the Caribbean and so on and so forth would be technically separate, but they're so in the context of this giant landmass that they would be agglomerated in a certain way. And I guess in a similar case, it would be interesting to consider the matter of Australia, as to where it fits in with the World Island versus New World sort of thing. Regardless, this didn't just happen, right? There was not just a magical process whereby such things happened. It occurred through particular forms. So when we think about the position of what is considered to be the United States of America today, it must be seen in the context of this long historical process. As I observe, there's a sharp differentiation or variety, a complex and often conflictual variety, which in how people understand long, centuries long, thousands of years long, millions of years long, the historical process they may even see as a cosmological process by which we have been delivered to our present circumstances. So how did we get here? Fundamentally, we disagree about that. Or what does it mean how we got here? Undoubtedly, all of life is filled with struggle, even before, as we understand, we can imagine without the world without things like us, right? If we think about sharks, or as we have come to understand about disease, there have been plagues before us. And yes, so life is filled with strife, and life can end brutally. It is very important that we all understand that, in part so that we properly appreciate the sweetness of relative peace. This is a matter which is sometimes discussed here in these United States, with the matter of, is the military is protecting something, protecting our freedom or something. The question that we must ask ourselves is whether our security interests, our survival, and especially our survival as something that we would recognize, the sort of the Constitution of the United States and the sort of idea of America, it in its ideal form should stand in for something which is worth protecting. And so it's obviously we are not merely a Christian or a polity or a group which valorizes Christianity, but it's similar to the idea of winning the world and losing your soul. We now confront the deployment of technologies which seem entirely capable of reducing people to automatons who are not capable of thinking or making choices. So even as we extend our capacity We pioneer on the frontier of technological capability, and it is entirely fitting and proper that we should do this. At the same time, we must ask ourselves, what are the dynamics of the situation? What have we gotten ourselves into? And what are further frontiers that we can ford in addressing the existential in both senses, the threats to our survival as well as to our self-respect, self-conceptualization, our sense of purpose. How will we safeguard our sense of purpose and cohesion as a group of people? So in this sense, it is very important to understand, as I said, when I speak of Americans, I'm speaking of all sentient beings across time and space. Because if we are going to, live in a world where there is, such a, shall we say, a dominant idea of the, as the United States, right? And what will the United States do? And here comes Donald John Trump into office, and we're all so aghast. We're all waiting with our bated breath to see what will happen because of the United States, right? And how do people think about the United States? That is why this is an important topic. And so if this is going to be an important topic, then we might as well pull everything into it. It reminds me of the situation where we do not have a system of adjudicating disputes on a planetary or superplanetary level. So we are locked into these seeming conflicts, and we see them as these conflicts between what are known as nation states, or people give them various names. But, we talk about Russia and China and the United States of America as countries that are struggling against each other. In part, I believe we focus on this level of analysis because we are not able to see all of the different disputes, the important capabilities that are being developed and controlled or kept under the watch of different parties, the various clandestine activities, the secrets which are kept not only from the public, but also from basically inside bureaucratic structures, secrets which are kept from participants themselves, right? People keeping secrets from each other, compartmentalization, and so on. Again, it is entirely fitting and proper in some sense that this should be done. Anybody who seriously applies themselves to a task will understand the utmost concern for discretion and discipline which will arise. That said, it is to be considered a frontier in some sense to consider the second order effects of this mentality. In other words, of course, we must be vigilant. We must defend ourselves. That requires making a consistent effort, which implies, in some sense, a consistent conceptualization and the performance of tasks which are, in some sense, repeated, right, on a large scale. On the other hand, it must also be endemic, which is to say, on the mind and lips of everyone involved, that ultimately the goal of the organization, of our cooperation, of our being here, right? The goal, or the outcome, what is going to happen, that is open-ended. That's what freedom is. Freedom is the ability not to have to live up to somebody else's expectations. And that is the situation that we should be seeking to deliver to each other as Americans, as sentient beings. We should be putting each other in the situation where we are able to continue to explore ourselves, our inner frontier. If. It's the power of if. This sense of an inner frontier is just as vital to the security, the flourishing, the dynamism of America, of sentient beings, of our moment. Just as important as the frontiers of technological development, and of course, the corollary, of course, the frontier of space. We live in a time which could be tremendously exciting, but it's also a time which is tremendously anxiety-inducing, one where people are suffering, people are dying, not only in armed conflicts, people are being bombed in their homes, but also people are being deprived, we are not caring for each other as well as we could. This is something where we can all find ourselves implicated. It's very important that we as Americans, it's easy for us to sometimes think that the cards are stacked against us. Well, if we have been set a test, we will meet it. There's no doubt about that. But the important thing is for us to seek ways to overcome our problems where we can work together and we can tap into whoever else is out there, we can tap into their sense of self-interest. And even beyond that, but we can come back, the sense that as Americans, we are not against anyone. We seek to uphold the words of Abraham Lincoln in the second inaugural address, with malice toward none, and charity for all. Right? Charity not coming from a place of the superiority, not from a place where we need to be in the position to give to other people and take away from them in order to then give back to them, some crumbs. No. We will live up to this in a deeper sense. And there is no sense in which this involves the impoverishment of anyone. As I've said, as Americans, we seek the frontier. The frontier is more foundational than anything. Obviously, this idea itself is fraught. It is associated with what might be termed historical violence, the having to do with the origins of the United States of America, and violence which is considered by many to continue to the present day. But we might also consider that the idea of the frontier precedes even the idea of America or the New World. If we think about our ancestors far in the past, before there were others of our kind all over the planet, or even other hominids, we can go back even further if that's what's necessary. When we were spreading across the land, that was already the frontier. And even each of us, when we are born, when we come into the world, we experience a new frontier. And so in that sense, it's very important for each of us not to internalize some idea that the frontier means that we're going to run roughshod over other people, or that we're going to victimize, that we will profit at the expense of others' suffering. That's precisely not the idea. Our idea of the frontier in this time involves precisely going inward to understand, to go deeper into ourselves. Because as Americans, we embrace ourselves. We love ourselves. And as our project continues, we will come as Americans to more and more fully appreciate what that means. In actuality, we have already committed ourselves to a great task, which we might say it asks much of us. It asks of each of us what we are able to give. And as for what we will receive, it asks of us what we are capable of receiving. And in this time, we are being asked by destiny, by history, by each other, whether we are capable of receiving the sort of honest and frank counsel that we need. And we are being asked whether we are willing to make bold steps in order to improve the conditions of ourselves, our families, and all of the structures and all those other families out there that help make up our conditions of life. We are simply being asked, what is our idea of what we belong to? What is it that you belong to? That's what I ask. I ask you, what do you belong to? Personally, I ground myself in the idea of all sentient beings. I belong to whatever everyone belongs to. In my lower moments, I think about this because it is easy to doubt one's worthiness. And when people doubt their worthiness, it's really important for there to be something which accepts everyone, which will take everyone in. And for me, I associate that with America. You can consider it on the Statue of Liberty, the tired, the poor, but also just who came in the first place. So-called excess populations. These dynamics are fraught. As Americans, our ancestors were often in bloody struggle with each other. As Americans, many of us are dying on the street. As Americans, thousands of us choose to end our lives every day. The situation is unspeakably tragic. As Americans, we are threatened ever more by international conflicts and the threat of the use of force. We are driven by fleeting incentives. We chase after money sometimes, or status, or all these different forms of being satisfied. And in the meantime, what are we doing? We're developing technologies. We are ever more working on each other with our forms of communication and the theories which are being applied to them. There's no reason to be paranoid about this. As Americans, we can be optimistic because we understand that those who will succeed are those who will go into the frontier. We understand that those who succeed will be those who think outside the box, who do not accept, established ways just because somebody says so. And we're going to find a way around it. But we don't do so in the name simply of self-interest. We do it because we're part of something. We're part of something that matters a lot. And again, it's very important that can be open to anyone. Anyone can be an American. As I was saying before, the continents, North and South America, could be described as the Americas or just America. But in a larger sense, we're all Americans. I was thinking of relating before that, absent a global governance program, people influence the United States of America as their way of seeking to influence global affairs. Well, all to the good. If we're here to affirm the idea of America, then let us do so according to our conscience, according to what can succeed. And in order to do that, it is necessary to continue to go forward. And when people try to tell you a limited idea of what America is, you can feel safe. There's not even a need to respond. Do not expose yourself to any unpleasantness. It is important that we conserve our equanimity, our peace of mind, because for each of us with a conscience, for each of us who is trying to be mindful, who understands that even as much as there's the frontier outside, where there's so much to be done, so much to be organized, so much to be communicated, so much to be established. At the same time, there is an inner frontier, and there is a place where we must continually be investigating ourselves, not merely in self-recrimination. There's no need for any negative feelings associated with this. But as Americans, we are intensely curious. We are always seeking to improve. There's no reason to feel bad about what we've done in the past because we were doing the best that we could at the time. But we resolve to continue to do that. And when we have new understanding, the birth of cognitive dissonance, as we come to understand that, the ways that we've understood to do things in the past are no longer effective, or were not effective in the ways that we thought, we change our ways. Because that's what we do, because this is important. Because not only, our survival, the survival of our loved ones, but our very dignity and self-respect demands that we do everything that we can to advance the cause of freedom, justice, and security for all sentient beings. And these words are easy to use in a flippant way. And whenever people try to turn groups against each other, whenever people try to act like, they solidify the enemy as a character, as a flat character, as you'd say, in a movie or a TV show, somebody who's two-dimensional. Whenever we refuse to see the depth and the complexity, that is when we ourselves are closed off. And it goes back to the question of, what are you willing to give and what are you willing to receive? And it remains open for us all to see all around us where we have the help build up America, reinvent America. America is not one thing. America is everything that we make it all the time. So at every moment, we have the ability to, we're giving back. We are contributing. We are placing our foundation stone for the future. We are all founders in America. And whether or not you have a business has nothing to do with it. We are all setting the foundation stone for everything that is to come. For better, it's going to work out. But in order to do that, we all have to take this very seriously. At the same time, of course, America is a celebration. Part of the reason why we are going to be able to achieve these serious objectives is because we can keep things in perspective. And it's again back to the whole idea of freedom. In order to enjoy freedom, there has to be a certain degree of letting go. Other people are going to enjoy doing things that you don't quite understand. There are important areas, and they will never be gone, right, where we have a debate, right? We must have a dispute about what constitutes harm, what are harmful activities that should not be prohibited even among the free. That being said, what's nice about being free, having freedom of movement and association, hanging out with people, laughing, dancing, celebrating. And again, there's so much to celebrate. We have achieved so much. You can see our initiatives being deployed all over as we have, emotional intelligence building rhetoric being built into advertisements and all sorts of inducements. We have people being nudged to be more conscientious upwards of 1,000 times a day. These are very heavy-handed procedures, but you have to understand that we're simply seeing, the ground being laid for ever more subtle and enriching messages. But of course, there's nothing in the messages themselves. The magic happens with Americans, right? With us as sentient beings. And so we are constantly trying to improve, our ability to, help deliver the kind of flourishing community that we know everybody expects. In building up the city on the hill, we do not mean to, simply build up, the territory of what's considered the United States of America first, and show everyone how it's done. To be a city on a hill is something a one person can do, right? It means to be an exemplar, to be an example. That is so much of what is missing in this day and age. And that is why each of us must take it upon ourselves to hold ourselves to a new kind of standard. We must look around and not simply say to ourselves, oh, well, I'm no worse than these other people that I know. Because we can ask ourselves, is that really the standard to which we would hold ourselves? Do we think that's a standard that can meet the challenges of our time? And if we say that the answer is no, then as Americans, we have to keep going. We have to keep going west into where the sun is setting or seems to be setting, and we'll chase a new day there.